Coming up on Good Journeys with Second Mountain.
So we sat on the call and they were, two or three of them were in tears going, we just can't. I was like, but you have to. We're about to make you look the best you've ever looked. Why would you not do it? I donated the time to them and we just chipped it away. We did it very professionally and we did it.
Welcome to Good Journeys with Second Mountain, the show that explores the trails travelled and lessons learned from some truly extraordinary guests. I'm so excited for this Good Journeys conversation because I have one heck of a personal journey with my very special guest today, and it's going to be my real pleasure to share his story with you all. Before we get to that, if this is your first time checking out the show, then I'm your host, Ben Veal, the founder of Second Mountain Comms. Good Journeys is all about the lessons learned from a host of really inspiring people. Joining me today is my guest and my dear friend, Robin Worrall, the creative director of Rednine Design and Brand. Robin's incredible creative vision has successfully launched startup businesses and repositioned established international brands by creating, building and shaping businesses into brands that have a story to be told. Robin has a really big heart for working with good people and working with charities, and he just has a big heart generally. Welcome to the show, Robin. How are you doing, my friend?
To say, Robin, is that really me? I'm good. Good to see you again. Virtually, which is a shame because we've missed our walks together. But
we have missed our walks together. What, you know, taking it right back to the beginning. I mean, the lockdown walks were very, very special to me. I mean, you and I used to meet at 4:15 every Wednesday afternoon, which was when I had a child-free window negotiated with the wife, and we used to do our stomp around Wiltshire and put the world to rights and have a jolly good chat. And I don't know, I kind of miss the simpler, quieter days of lockdown in a way, don't you?
Yeah, did that really all happen? It's kind of a bit weird, isn't it? It's like I watched an Instagram post the other day when there was a comedian saying, "Can you remember the Thursday night clap that we all used to gear our worlds around, our lives around?" And I remember our street, there was a woman used to come out with castanets, and then the next woman would come out with a saucepan, and then the next woman would come out with a tambourine, and it seemed to be like a competition for like the best thing. But yeah, it's funny to kind of think back that we all kind of went through that, but still kind of feeling the repercussions of it. I feel certainly in sort of business and sort of creativity at the moment, you still have to sort of negotiate a couple of those hurdles that are still in place, which is a challenge.
I think so, because, you know, as creatives, we're kind of naturally people, and we get the buzz and energy of being around people. And we all had to kind of become very introverted for a long period of time, yet keep that creativity going, didn't we, during a real period of isolation? And I think you're right. I think there's still a hangover from that time. I'm certainly still feeling it 4 years on. Like, I've learned an awful lot about myself during both lockdown periods. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for lockdown, ironically. But yeah, it definitely, you know, they talked a lot in 2022 about how we'd be heading back to normal now, and here we are in mid 2024, and I don't think life is really that much more normal than it was then.
No, it was a period of time when I'm 56, so it was kind of, I felt sorry for those creatives that hadn't had big life kind of lessons yet and hadn't been on a really sort of intricate path just because they haven't had the kind of the years in order to kind of fit all that in. I mean, I don't think we've got long enough to kind of go through all my sort of intricacies, but that said, it's like when you're creative, you have to look back, you have to look into your sort of pot of inspiration and work out which bits you want to pull out. Because one thing I always say whenever I talk with sort of, and I don't call them clients, sort of creative relationships, I'll never invent anything new. It's more of a case of identifying what already exists in their world and what's relevant and relatable for them. And then I'll come and sort of cherry pick out. But if you haven't had that sort of longevity of experience, it's a very hard place to then go and, well, then you start shortcutting it and you just go to the internet and pluck an image of a guy on a mountain or woman drinking coffee, and then choose a typeface that you like the look of. It doesn't come from any inherent sort of identity. It's not something you saw on a billboard in a street in a foreign country, or a color of a coffee cup that you sat in a cafe in some sort of random city, which is that's where I get all my sort of inspiration from. So the travel bit that kind of got cut when we locked down, I would then reflect back on all my memories and all my sort of inspiration and try and pull that forward. So yeah, it was an interesting time. And then I started feeling that I was running out of those inspirations because you can't sort of use them too much. So thankfully, as we start to come out, I then realized I had to get back out. I had to get in front of theatre. I had to get traveling again. I had to walk around my local city and just be more sort of aware of what was around me, which ironically is what they told us to do in lockdown. Lift your head up, pay attention to the breeze. It's like, I know, I've always done that. I've always walked through an airport, like appreciating it all and lifting my head up and looking at the sky and looking at the ground. But then they were telling us, no, you've got to do it more and be really mindful, which is a word that really bugs me at the minute. I'm more about being more mindless at the minute. That's my key word for the moment, being mindless.
What do you mean by that? By kind of focusing, by emptying your mind and just focusing on being present?
This mindful. I know there's the kind of. I just think it's words like that get overused and then they kind of lose their meaning because they just become sort of commonplace. But mindlessness to me is. I've started doing life drawing classes lately, and I'm not a brilliant artist, but I do love to sketch and draw. And just the people that I'm sat next to, and it's just lovely to just literally do that, to empty your mind for an hour and a half. And then, funny enough, as you're driving home, all these answers come flooding in, all this other creativity sort of has space to then come and find itself in there. We may touch on it later, but I went on a retreat. I did it twice, actually. It was kind of like, this will sound a bit fluffy, but it came as a bit of a calling. It kind of came and found me and said, do you fancy this? And it was so alien to me. Do you fancy 3 weeks away from life to just kind of reset? And everybody said, oh, you're just going to stop and do nothing, aren't you? And the weirdest thing was that everything started. As soon as I got there and I let go and became mindless, everything came flooding, all the answers, all the kind of relief and understanding of things that I found very complicated at that time, all started to sort of knit together and sort of join up. So yeah, it's an interest. I think being at one with yourself, which again, that doesn't sit comfortably saying that. That sounds a little bit kind of woo-woo, but just giving yourself that time to just be silent, turn the telly off, don't scroll through your phone, but do pick up a book or a sketchbook or classically go for a walk or find a friend that you can just, do you know what, that lovely moment of sometimes we just didn't need to talk, we could just walk and then you just kind of have that harmony with a really true friend that you just know that you don't have to fill the gaps. You're not just filling the sort of the void with just chatter, which kind of doesn't really get you. Well, it does. It's a comfort, but it's a little bit like a cup of coffee or a slice of cake. It's just a short-lived comfort. Sometimes.
Which is, yeah. I mean, those walks we had were so special, and we will get back into a good routine because I think life just gets so busy, doesn't it? And I know what you're saying about the point of wonder because I certainly remember like the very early days when we were coming out of lockdown and you could start to go to things again. I remember going to a cinema for the first time, not wearing a face mask and just sitting around looking at me and being like, there's other human beings in this room. And then I remember maybe it was a year later, I went and saw Coldplay at Wembley Stadium, and there I am, 80,000 people, the big light show, and just looking around. I just took some time to be like, I can't believe I'm getting to do this.
Yeah.
I've now done so many of those big events in the last few years and been surrounded by all these people that I don't want to lose that sense of wonder because there was a period where you just felt like I'm so privileged to be able to be out with groups of people again and to have that diversity and that rich experience. And but I think we'll always be the generation that went through a lockdown as working adults. and that should always stick with us. Hopefully, the good lessons learned from that. But one of the things I want to kind of kick off talking about is, you worked on a very, very special project during that first lockdown. So we both had the privilege of working together for the Charlie Waller Trust. And your role was very much, as the charity was repositioning to meet the needs of a much more digital world, it needed to tell its story in a different way. And your job was to find a way of doing that. So can you talk to me a bit about what the charity does first and how you slotted in during lockdown?
So I was introduced to them. They, I think from memory, they had been going for around about 25 years. I think I'm right in saying that. It's a really tragic story. Charlie Waller was a young lad of 27, I believe, and took his life. And his family were devastated. He had actually gone to the doctors and said that he was struggling, but he was typically one of those people that hid all of his emotions. He grew up in a sort of an environment where men were men, and you didn't sort of divulge that you were struggling with anything. So he had gone to his doctor. His doctor had said, I think, go and get a cup of tea, have a shower, go for a run, and you'll get over it. Anyway, I believe I'm right in saying this as well. He took his life a couple of weeks after his brother's wedding, where he was best man. So he was the life and soul. I'd never met him clearly, but I did read a lot up about his story and hear from all of the individuals that I spoke to who are now running the charity. So they set up a memorial trust, and it was actually called the Charlie Waller Memorial Trust when I was first introduced to them. So that was something I sort of said, look, maybe we need to kind of just realign how you talk about yourself, but actually putting Charlie back in the center. So with any charity, well, with any project, I always try and get literally as close to it as possible. Now, lockdown was the hardest challenge because normally I would sit face to face, I would go therapy sessions, I would meet individuals, and you kind of feel it. You just sense the kind of the emotion and the connection that they have with the charity or the organization. This one was kind of unique, and it's not one that I've replicated insofar as all of the 40 plus interviews were all conducted on Zoom, which some of the people I was talking to were in their later years, so technology wasn't the easiest. It's also then meeting somebody that they've never met before, and it's just a name and a Zoom invitation and then a conversation online. Thankfully, we were kind of all used to those sort of conversations. We'd had the quizzes with the family, and I dealt with my mum just having a conversation with the sort of forehead.
Let's just take it. Let's just stop for a moment to say how awful Zoom quizzes were. That's one thing when we were talking about lockdown. So
our family did one, and it was horrendous. We were all cheating because we were all just looking up the answers on Google and then just firing them off. So
trying to get it over with.
Yeah. There's always one family member that takes it very seriously, but yeah, I think the rest of us were just, can we say dicking around on this podcast?
Yeah.
Just generally dicking around and consuming too much alcohol. My son was trying to be a trainee cocktail waiter, so we just used to click our fingers and he would just come with cosmopolitans.
Oh, amazing.
Whatever we wanted. So we were kind of like well serviced. So sorry, we digress. So yeah, Charlie, it was a tricky one. It was a tricky one because I was even presenting, which I've never done, presenting creative on a Zoom call where you're just waving your arms and trying to get the sentiment over of where you want to position them, where you want to kind of like how you want the brand to kind of work. And back to what I said earlier, it's like I don't invent anything new. I do go and look into their cupboards. I kind of look at what's out of date, what don't they need to use anymore, what is absolutely key to their story, what are the little gems that we cannot use. Part of the dialogue that I have with them is what are you happy to keep, what are you happy to lose, and what could we add? And then that just starts the conversation around what they're tired of, what they don't see kind of like is relevant to them anymore, what things excite them. So it's a really lovely way to get people that always start the conversation with, I'm not creative. You don't need to be. This is just about conversation. This is just about your relationship with, in this particular instant, the charity. But I was meeting a lot of individuals who had been affected by mental health, either their own or they'd lost loved ones. The amount of tragedy that was kind of threaded through, there was a lot of tears. Theirs and mine. I mean, I'm a bit of my heart's on my sleeve. If somebody else, I kind of have quite an empathetic kind of approach to creativity. I love to work with those that I love to work with. And that then always creates better, relatable creativity, which then makes it all work. So I'm not a designer that will pick the latest color, the latest font. I do tend to look back at their history, look at their relevance today, and then look at a way that we can kind of project them into the future and make sure there's that classic word, sort of future-proofed as best we can. How do you future-proof around a world that's in lockdown? It was a tricky place, but then we knew there and then that we had to get them from where they were, which was a 25-year-old looking logo, which had been used in every computation you could possibly imagine. There was no consistency or clarity to their brand, but you only had to look behind that curtain and you could, the work that they did, the support that they offer children all the way up through into first stage employment. And they've kind of categorized each of those levels. They work with schools, they work with universities, they work with individuals. They've got influencers from all of those fields to be able to talk. So it's teenagers talking to teenagers, and it's employers talking to employees. And I've been in businesses where their posters are on the back door of the toilets. So, the industries and corporates have taken their principles and brought them in. And I have to say, I'm absolutely humbled by how they got hold of the brand. And working with Amy, their in-house designer, we work very closely. I would sort of create new templates for her, which then I would pass over. And then together we would evolve them. And then to the point where it's that classic teach a man to fish. And I can kind of it's a kind of sad stage where you step back and you realize your role is pretty much kind of done. And I just nudge in every now and again and actually just thank her and congratulate her on what I've just seen online, because the material, everybody should go and have a look at them. Charlie Waller, they've done some brilliant material. And I had a lovely moment last year where I went to the Bath Half with a mate just to go and see his wife run. And Charlie Waller were there, Trauma Breakthrough were there, Jessie May were there. Who's the other one? Wiltshire Ambulance, who I'm working with at the moment, were there. And it was just seeing all your brands, all of your charity brands, or We Get It were there. Either vests running or in the charity tent or bespoke tents, just kind of seeing that presence, it just kind of makes you realize the kind of the breadth of sort of that you can kind of reach, really.
Thank you so much for being with us for this inspiring conversation today on the Good Journeys with Second Mountain podcast. We'll return to our guest interview very soon, but I want to just take a few seconds now to thank our partners on the show, Resilient Leaders Elements, and tell you all about the positive change they're making in the world. We live in uncertain times where the only constant is change. Resilience has never mattered more, and it's much more than just a buzzword to the team at RLE. Leadership is about resilience, and RLE are focused on making world-class leadership development available to all, training people worldwide to build the skill sets needed to become resilient leaders. RLE's highly respected Resilient Leaders Development Programme is a bespoke development tool that's perfect for leaders of all levels, and you can sign up right now. So if you want to turbocharge your leadership growth and become more resilient both in the workplace and in your personal life, there's never been a better time to start your journey. Visit resilientleaderselements.com now to find out more. Yeah, and the impact you've made, because we were talking off air. I mean, being very honest here, recording this in mid-2024, it's been a really, really, really hard time for freelancers. It's been the hardest market that I have ever navigated in 20 years in business. You've said the same to me. I know countless other creatives and people who run small businesses in our sector who have found the last 6 months or so incredibly hard to kind of navigate these waters. So I think when you get a moment like that, you just have to sit back and be really proud of what you've achieved, because
Yeah.
it can sometimes feel like a slightly thankless task being in our industries. I think you get a moment when you can look around and be like, wow, all of these brands I helped bring to life and helped reach a new audience. And that's really special. And that's a testament to your creativity.
I mean, one thing I have, you're right. I didn't see it coming. I thought I've always sort of ridden the waves quite successfully or kind of quite well before. I'm just, I don't follow the pound, but I do kind of make sure that I've kind of my creative connections are quite strong. So I don't think I've ever advertised. I think all of my connections have always come through word of mouth. They've always come through fate or conversation. You've done them as well. I did a number of really challenging rooster talks at the Glove Factory Studios in Holt, which I loved. I mean, they panicked the hell out of me. It's like the night before, I just dreaded why I said I'd do it. It was that point where people say, push yourself to the limit, and I did. But a lot of support and connections came out of those, and just kind of keeping that. I think the creative industry. Sometimes we're good at this, and sometimes we're not. Sometimes we all hide behind our own sort of walls and sort of put out we pretend to say that we're doing great when we're not. So tipping back into Charlie Waller, that's exactly what they're about. It's like you could admit it's hard, you could admit it's tough. Your vulnerability is really, really precious. And that's what I use when I'm working with when I'm working with clients as well. It's offering that vulnerability to say, you can go out to the market and say you need funds, you're struggling, you need support. And Charlie were open to that. And another one that was really key that we launched in lockdown was Cerebral Palsy Cymru, who I worked with them prior to lockdown. Everything was going swimmingly. We'd done all 40 plus interviews. I'd cried buckets coming back from Cardiff, sat in therapy sessions with young parents, or even there was an elderly couple who had temporarily fostered a young baby. Cerebral palsy isn't diagnosed until any child is 2.5 years. So this child was from birth. They recognized there were signs, but you can never definitely say. And this child was around about 2. So they were Cerebral Palsy Cymru were offering them a sort of an intervention sort of therapy. But seeing this couple realize who they were fostering was potentially going to have a very difficult start in life. But that team came together and supported them. And me kind of being a part of that just gave me that space to kind of get as close as possible to kind of build their brand and make it really relevant. Then we got to the point where lockdown hit and Wales went really strong on this. And we had a Zoom call, and I was working with Digital Wonder Lab, and we were all on screen together. And I'd spoken to Nathan, the founder of Digital Wonder Lab, prior to that, and said, look, we need to get them to launch. But I don't think they will. I think they're really nervous of being seen to be spending money during lockdown that their audience will think was a waste of time. So we sat on the call, and they were 2 or 3 of them were in tears going, we just can't. And it's like, but you have to. We're about to make you look the best you've ever looked. Why would you not do it? So I did a bit of I had got some funding from the government, as the fortunate kind of creatives did, because we were struggling. And I can't remember, I think it was around about 10,000. And I said, okay, look, this is money that's come into me, but I haven't earned it. So I'm going to give it back to you, to give back to me. So I will give you £10,000 worth of time. And that's what we did. I donated the time to them, and we just chipped it away, and we did it very professionally. So it didn't kind of run away with itself, and it didn't start sort of flowing into sort of voluntary sort of work. But I think, one, it gave them faith that I was behind them, and Nathan was as well. And we did it. And I went to the opening of I don't want to get emotional on this one. I went to the opening of their children's centre on Wednesday, and just seeing the determination of that team made me realise it was all worth it, because it was blood, sweat, and tears, but the way that it just sings now, that charity and their brand and their team and just the emotional drive behind all of them, it all just comes together as one. And that's what I love to work for and with. So finding those people, it's not the charities that are important, it's the people within them. And once you find that connection, then the world sort of flows out from there. The sort of creativity and the relationship flows out from there.
Well, it's people and purpose, isn't it? Because of course, a real similarity between Charlie Waller and Cerebral Palsy Cymru is the founding story, and the fact that that charity really came about because a young family couldn't find the provision they needed for their child, and so essentially started to build it for themselves. And that's the thing I love with working with so many charities and not-for-profits, much like you. I just love finding the roots behind the story, like where does it all begin? Because often that's where the beautiful future can be written, is actually looking to the past and going, okay, so this was where you were at the beginning. This is what you envisaged. This is where you wanted to take things. You may have become a bit lost along the way as you've grown and as outside forces have come in, but let's take it back to that beginning and let's really work towards your future. And I think you and I do it more with words, you do it more with visuals, but we're very aligned. And that's why we work well on these projects in terms of telling that full story with purpose.
Yeah, no, definitely. But your stories, I have to work with that story. Otherwise, I'm just creating images or graphics for a void. It has to connect with something. So I know you were connected with Charlie Worrall. I think that's where we originally met on a Zoom call. And that was the presentation that I was giving out to the kind of the team to say, look, this is this is our story. And the story with Charlie Worrall was taken right back to the beginning. It was taken, but I spoke to his parents, and that was a really tricky conversation because they weren't up for change. And the board as well, and some of the trustees kind of couldn't see the vision. But Claire, the CEO at the time, she was totally behind it. And I worked very closely with her and her kind of in-house marketing team in order to give them the armor and the illustration of how what they could look like. And as soon as you start to pull those curtains back and they start to see it, and they kind of get it. But it is full story. It's your words, it's my pictures, and it's also capturing that emotion, which is really key. So being whenever people ask me, what do you do? It's like, I can't answer it, because I say to my mum, graphic designer. I say to my partner, I just colour in for money. People pay me to colour in, and he's quite happy with that. But it's like, how do you describe it? How do you describe what you do? Because it's kind of like there's therapy in there, there's empathy in there, there's creativity in there, there's a shed load of curiosity. I get told off I asked, one, I talk too much. Two, I ask too many questions. But I said to somebody the other day, you're asking me not to ask questions, to not question things. That's like telling me, don't breathe anymore. Stop breathing. Hold your breath. I can't. I have to know what's behind the curtain. It's the whole Wizard of Oz thing. You've got to kind of, I want to know how it works. I love theatre because I love getting behind the scenes and just seeing what we're seeing out there is produced by smoke and mirrors and cleverness and trickery and lights and that. There's something about theatre and my creativity just all sort of fits together as well. I just love that whole sort of behind the scenes kind of element to it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think I've settled on calling myself a creative storyteller now. I've gone through so many kind of different, I'm a content creator. I used to be a PR. What am I? But I'm someone at heart who takes people's stories and amplifies them and champions them in many different ways. And I don't think that many people fit squarely into boxes anymore, certainly in the creative industry. But I want to circle back to the presentation you gave, because one of the things that's one of the most debilitating things about the creative sector is imposter syndrome.
Okay.
And the fascinating thing about the presentation you described, which is the first time that our paths ever crossed, was I was one of 50 people invited to that Zoom call to hear, the creative director of Rednine present the brand vision, which you did marvelously for 45 minutes. And I came away from that really blown away, really bought into this journey that I hadn't been a part of really up until that point, and really motivated by it. And I reached out to you, which is something I didn't do much at the time, and said, look, we're both local. I've recently started this business. I don't know if you fancy meeting a coffee, but meeting for a coffee, but I was very impressed with what you delivered, and it'd be great to do so. And you immediately responded with a very kind message. We met, and a friendship started. But my impression of that presentation was that you were this really kind of high flying international creative director who wouldn't have time to speak to little old me just starting up. And the reality is, from speaking with you, I mean, you were incredibly nervous about doing that presentation, weren't you? And felt quite out of your comfort zone, having to do essentially a closed one-way PowerPoint presentation to about 50 faceless people on Zoom for the best part of an hour. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to see what we project sometimes isn't necessarily what's on the inside.
Yeah, no, totally. I don't know if I should divulge this, but there's the new Prince Andrew documentary on Netflix
Mhm.
called Scoop.
Yes.
Um, well, Picture Palace was my creative. That whole um, enterprise that he put together, I was part of the original team that named it, branded it, and then the PR agency that I worked with at the time sort of let go of it, and I picked it up with Amanda, who's in the show, portrayed in the show, and put it together. And here's the thing, it's like the girl that was the booker in that, I kind of related to her because there's one minute she's walking through the door of Buckingham Palace, which I did, which was phenomenal. And you're suited and booted, and you're sat in the little waiting room, and there's pictures of the Queen and beautiful vase of roses, and you're given a cup of tea in crested china. The next minute, you're sat at home eating pizza in a pair of joggers. And I always used to laugh. It's like 1 minute I'm there and 1 minute I'm there. But it's the same Robin. But I can tell my mum the story about, where were you today? I was at Buckingham Palace. What are you doing today? Well, eating pizza, mum, watching Married at First Sight or whatever. Some rubbish that's on the telly. And it is that smoke and mirrors thing. And we were all at the glove factory, and I think people used to see Instagram and stuff. And I've never been a massive fan of Instagram. I used to put some stuff out on there, but it was always truthful. I've never tried to portray a life that doesn't really exist. But there is a yin to the yang. There is some extremes to my world. And I've been very blessed to have some, what on the outside look like, and are some incredible high profile events, flying to San Francisco, working there a week every month, working with a team in Buckingham Palace, walking through the doors of Downing Street. My career has had those moments, but then equally, I work with a very small local charity called We Get It, and will very happily sit in shitty jeans and a t-shirt, having a coffee, having a cry, and just scribbling in a book to kind of work out where we're going next. So yeah, I think I've answered your point, but yeah, there is a kind of a smoke and mirrors kind of element to creativity and how people perceive. But then that's it. All I want to say actually on that is I then look at others in the industry and think, but then maybe you're just like me. We all think you come with this title and you come with this heritage of experience, which places you on a pedestal, but it doesn't. I'm sure they're just the same. Everybody is just the same.
Mm.
And from the waist up, you can be suited and booted, but from the waist down, you've no idea. I could be sat here.
It boggles the mind what's going on below there.
No, I'm not. I actually dressed up for this.
Ah,
I just do when there's an event. Yeah.
but I thought of you when I was watching. I watched Scoop recently, and it's interesting kind of dramatization. I mean, you compare it against the Prince Andrew interview itself, and yeah, I kind of came away from it with as I always do from dramatizations, you could see certain mannerisms and things played out. But I thought of you because obviously I knew the role you had at Pitch and Palace, and I hope you're still incredibly proud of what you achieved on that project, which of course
Immensely
was a
proud.
project with incredible ambitions. And it's a shame, obviously, that there is this tarnish to it via what's happened since. But as a project, incredible.
I mean, we're not here to talk about him, but that was his story. But the impact of that sadly broke everything that we were doing. We'd run 156 events and across 65 countries, and the alumni was vast. And it was, I have to correct as well on the show, they show the Pitch at Palace event, which is like 60 people sat in a dingy little dark room. We were 600 people at Buckingham Palace in the ballroom with state-of-the-art technology, screens, music, giveaway. The whole thing was just incredibly orchestrated. And to be part of that team was immense. But the one thing that I was mortified by was they'd sort of replicated my logo and placed it on a banner behind him in the show. It wasn't my logo at all. So, but the world, in my head, will be thinking, "Oh yeah, Robin did Pitch and Palace. Ooh, that's a shitty ass logo that he did." But yeah, that bit they hadn't. So it is interesting, kind of. I mean, even with that, it's like how people will take a story, interpret it their way in order to satisfy their audience.
It needs to fit the narrative, because with that particular scenario, if you champion too much of a person's achievements, it's very, very hard to then demonstrate the downfall, which is obviously the objective of what was a dramatization. So I think you always get that, but I can see it as someone who was obviously closely involved. I'm sure you were like, no, that's not my work.
It was interesting. I've never had it. I mean, I never will again. To see your life portrayed out on screen, because I knew all the characters, and I have to say, they got Amanda completely wrong. She is not that person. She is a phenomenal individual. I love her to bits. She's great, and we've worked on several things since. She's just an incredible force of nature, and they showed her as a sort of very doughy-eyed, sort of submissive, kind of like a bit floaty, kind of fluffy woman.
A very weak go with a flow character. Yeah.
God, no, not at all. Well, not the experience I had anyway. Anyway, that aside.
You mentioned We Get It briefly in passing there, and you're talking about wearing t-shirts and scruffy jeans and having a coffee. But you've done incredible work with We Get It. So tell the audience about what that charity does and your journey there.
It's a really lovely story. We Get It. I'm always very happy to tell it. There's an organization called Good for Nothing who were a national setup, and they had what they called charters in several cities, and Bath was hosting one, and the invitation went out. I can't remember where it was, on Instagram or somewhere. That basically invited anybody that had a skill or a talent that they thought could benefit another business, and they'd be willing to offer it for free. So I was like, hands up, I'll do that. That morning, you're going to get tears again. This is ridiculous.
That's fine.
That morning, my very good friend had been diagnosed with cancer. So it was a real blow. And then when I went to the evening, Laura, who's the founder of We Get It, stood up in a pair of bright yellow killer heels, started on the mic, and basically, sorry, I should say, there was about 10 companies, 10 businesses or enterprises or sort of entrepreneurs that had an idea and were a bit Dragon's Den-esque, were given 3 minutes on a mic to present their story, and then we in the audience would either say, we then voted them down to 3, and then they were then cherry-picked down to 1. But Laura stood up, and I can't remember what her opening line was, but it was around about she wanted to create a support community for those that had been diagnosed or affected by cancer. So she hadn't even put the mic down. I was straight over, stumbled over people, threw my business card into her hand, and went, I don't care what you're doing. I don't care where you're going. I don't care what your ideas are. I'm with you on this. We're working together.
Thanks once again for being with us for another inspiring conversation on the Good Journeys pod. At Second Mountain, we firmly believe that resilience lies at the heart of all good journeys, and our friends over at Resilient Leaders Elements are deeply passionate about making world-class leadership development available to all. RLE now has an exciting opportunity for those who share the belief that anyone can be a resilient leader. This is open to anyone who'd value an opportunity to collaborate with like-minded professionals from around the world. Their global Resilient Leaders Elements accreditation program gives you the chance to help others become more confident in who they are and what they do as a leader. The program is facilitated by an experienced Resilient Leaders consultant who will guide you through the journey step by step. You'll then be welcomed into a worldwide network of like-minded resilient leadership specialists. So if you're passionate about developing resilient leadership in yourself and others, why not consider training to become a Resilient Leaders consultant? Visit resilientleaderselements.com now and find out more.
Then we started to form a friendship. Again, it's the whole sort of thing, getting close to her, kind of understanding. And I said, we sat down and I said, so what are we calling this then? And she said, Eat, Move, Glow. And I went, oh, like that's not landed. There's nothing in that I relate to. I said, well, it's not really for you. It's a toolkit. It's a support group for women. But and I went, okay, how are you going to segregate? If you're only in Bath, you're going to children and fathers and husbands and men. They don't get any. I said they of anybody actually need more support because there's not so many charities that are actually designated towards men. Oh, right. Yeah, good point. I said, right, okay, we need to stop a minute. We need to go right back. Just tell me your story. Tell me why. And she said, oh, I just want people to get it. I just want people to understand that we've been there. That's why we're here. That we've experienced all that stuff. We know what it feels like to scream all day, cry all day, stay in bed all day, walk to the top of a mountain, do whatever. It's like, okay, then this is what we call it. And I wrote down I wish we kept it. I wrote it down on a post-it and slid it over the table. And it just said, we get it. And she went, don't be daft. That's ridiculous. That's just 3 words I just said. I went, yeah, but that's your words. So that is why we call it that. So I'm going to get 2 more coffees, go to the toilet and come back. By the time I got back, she was in tears. She went, you've got it, haven't you? It's that. And I went, yeah, it kind of pretty much is. So we just hung everything on that. And that charity, they've just won the Bath Life Awards this year for Charity of the Year. And they had the most phenomenal event last year, which is now going to be their flagship event, which is called Strength in Style, which brings all the community together. It's a fashion show, but it's independent of Bath. It's all the community nurses, support team who are the models. And the whole night is just a phenomenal experience. I've cried twice on this podcast. I howled through the whole night. It was, and I rarely do this, but that night really needed it. I did a little Instagram reel and I just recorded bits of the night. And there was this moment in the night where we had wasn't planned, a fire alarm went off and the whole show had to stop. We thought it would just like they kill the alarm and we carry on, but we were all ushered outside in the pouring rain. We had Alex Lovell from BBC Telly. She was there, so she had everybody in the rain, catwalking, like as a sort of way to kind of keep them occupied. Thankfully, we were all allowed back in, but it killed all the electrics. We had no music, we had no lights, we just had the overhead lights, so it was lit. And this was the moment when Laura just turned to me. She said, oh, it's just a disaster. And I went, no, it's not. Turn around and look at how everybody's pulling together. And they had, oh, this is ridiculous. This is only...
It's like, this is what happens when we're together, isn't it? I made you cry in my Rooster talk.
Yeah. The models walked on, the audience clapped to the beat of the imaginary music, and they all got their phones out and put their torches on, and the place, I don't think I've ever experienced it. It was just an entire room of, and this sounds really fluffy, of just love and support. And I turned to Laura and I said, this is what we are. We're a charity that through the horrendous difficulties of cancer just pull together and get through the best they can. And this is visual evidence of that. And we had a post-mortem of the show a couple of days later, and people going, oh, wasn't it a disaster with I said, are you kidding? Social media has exploded because of what happened, because it wasn't just a fashion show by a charity. It
Yeah.
was the fashion show that pulled themselves out of, it could have just all been an absolute disaster. And I put out this little reel and it had all of that included in it, that we're outside, it's raining, just me on camera and stuff. And then the whole clapping and bit at the end, and posted it. And I was on the train coming home, and just people out of nowhere that I haven't spoken to in years, or people that I didn't even know, just messaging me going, I'm in bits watching this. I went, I know. And just lovely connections. And I met up with a few people after it. So even just stuff like that just starts to connect you again. And it's that vulnerability. It's all the stuff we've sort of spoken about. But that charity, we get it. And they're having a massive rebrand this year, which thankfully I'm kind of part of. I won't let go of them. They can't get rid of me that easy. We've got films that are being put together. They're going to be represented at the new Dyson Centre at the RUH. I think there's big things coming for them. I feel it in my bones. There's a big shift for them where they're going to go from a small idea on the kitchen table to a very well-formed, established, self-funded. Or when I say self-funded, they'll have enough funds that can come through to be able to support them to really grow. So yeah, watch this space.
Wow, it's just so powerful. Like the kind of lives that you've had a chance to touch through your creativity and through your storytelling. I mean, this is what it's all about at the end of the day, isn't it? This is why we do what we do. It's just amazing to listen to.
Yeah. It's a tricky one to explain because it's like, so what do you do? I do graphic design, but just talking to you now, it's actually me realize again how deep it goes and how connected you are and how very difficult it is to let go of, and to not do your absolute ultimate best each and every time. You just can't. You can't just serve up something that's a couple of days worth of creativity. You always go over and above. You put your invoice in for 3 days, but you've carried it in your head. You've stood in the shower. It's like Cerebral Palsy Cymru was a shower moment. Somebody asked me the other day, how did you come up with the logo? It was like, oh yeah, it literally just popped in.
Yeah, mine are dog walks and voice memos and just suddenly thinking of a line and going, that's it. Yeah, it's if they're the best moments. Get away from your desk and be in a strange scenario and suddenly it just pops in. I know a lot of the work that you do is grounded in these kind of 3 R's. What makes a good kind of brand story for you, Robin?
I think I've touched them all already, actually. So relate, remember, retell, I sort of came up with, which was just I think I did not a podcast, sorry, I did a Glutatry Rooster talk on it, where for me, it's that if you can get as close to the brand as possible, and if your audience if they can relate to it, if they connect with it, if they see something of themselves in that. So it's like the brands that we love, which supermarket do you choose to go to? Which branding of clothing do you choose? Which toothpaste? It's kind of, there is a relationship there. There's something that goes far deeper. And then when you've got that in your life and you've remembered it and it's something that you can't live without, then you retell it on. I always tell the story. It's kind of like you're walking down the high street and there's a new restaurant opens and it's got flowers around the door and there's a guy there and you kind of like, oh, actually that looks like the sort of place I might like to go. For me, it would be a bit artisan looking. It would be a kind of a bit rough and ready, kind of, they'd serve great coffee. And you're greeted as you go in. It's not the physical stuff. It's not the coffee, but it is the ambience of it, the music, the texture, it's all the 5 senses. It's what does it smell like? How warm is it? Did you feel comfortable? Did you connect with it? And then you take away that story and you go and tell somebody, oh, you've got to go to that restaurant, that cafe, that new one that's just opened. I think you'd like it because I know what you like and that I think you'd really love it. Would I? Yeah, there you go. So I've now retold that story on, they retell that story on, and then the brand grows because then all those people telling your story become your infantry and they just run around the world going, Charlie Wallace, this incredible charity, Cerebral Palsy, this incredible bunch of therapists that just make changes to children's lives that you wouldn't believe. We get it. They've got this super strength in style event that you just have to go to. And it's all builds from there, I guess. So yeah, that's my philosophy.
Well, I want to we've gone into some kind of deep emotional pathways today. So I want to bring it back up. I want to talk Lego. So, you are anyone that follows you on social media or knows me, you are a Lego obsessive. Um, when did that joy start for you, Robin, and how much has it taken over your life now?
I think I loved it as a kid because it is that mindlessness of getting a kit and pulling it. I don't think I ever built. You always build it once as the kit tells you to, and then back in the day, you used to just pull it apart and build it again. I'm a bit more precious about that. But right, here's the funny story. It's actually Harvey, my son, that resurrected Lego about a year and a half ago. I think it was my birthday. And I was walking through IKEA with Robert, my partner, and this father was walking with his daughter towards us, and she was bawling her eyes out. And he said, and we heard the words, "If you don't stop crying, I'll take away your Disney Lego Princess Castle for an entire day." Well, I just was like, what? She must have killed the family dog. What the hell has she done that warrants such a punishment? And Robert was like, "What's your problem?" I went, "No, but did you hear? And hold on a minute, there is such a thing as a Lego Disney Princess Castle. I need that." So I took that home to Harvey and said, "Harvey, do you know there's a thing called a Lego Disney Princess Castle?" And he went, "No, Dad, what the hell are you on about?" Anyway, for my birthday, I got Beauty and the Beast Lego. So it became a joke.
Amazing.
And then from there, it just started kind of, I should probably spin around it, all then started building. But I do gayify all my cityscapes. So it's meant to be a jazz club, but I've got a bearded drag queen who runs it. I've got an entire Madonna minifig collection. I've collected all of their different characters or generated them. So yeah, there's a lot of love going on in my city of people just being who they need to be. But
But it's just so relaxing, isn't it? It's just such a lovely way to spend time. I mean, I love nothing more than, just playing Lego with my boys and just not even playing it, just like I'll just sit there mindlessly building towers. I mean, I'm not as creative as you when it comes to kind of the Lego stuff, but I find it really calming to just make like big squares, just like kind of work with my son on build it. He'll be
yeah,
like, I want a fortress. It's like, fine, I'll make the walls because I think it's something about my need for order in this world that I really enjoy finding all the four blocks and going, right, I will make you and how big can I make this and where can I add the windows? It's just again going back to the mindless analogy.
it's
It is,
definitely that.
yeah.
You can switch. There's some. I quite like rules to a point. I like conformity and I like things to be structured and ordered. So when anybody that owns any Lego, when you open the box, it's 12 or 14 bags and they're all sequential to kind of like work through the instructions. I will only allow myself to do maximum of two. But you open them up and then you set out all the whites together, all the colors together. Now, bear in mind, I'm colorblind. So I did this kit here, which is a little Japanese garden, but there's about four greens in there, and I can't tell the difference. And the browns look like reds. So poor Robert is there. He was actually away on business, and I sent him videos of me holding up bricks going, "Is this red? And is this brown?" And then you have to wait until the video's been opened and answered. It's like the one on the left, it's what this one is red. Yeah. So, and then I can then hold other red bricks next to it in order to identify whether that's red. So I can get all the bits together. So it does then start to become, it's slightly more layered then, because then you have to kind of train your brain. And people say to me, "How the hell can you do your job when you're
Yeah.
colorblind?" But I have learned the entire Pantone book. So I know I haven't got
That's
it.
incredible. I had no idea. I don't think that's ever come up in our
I know
discussions.
this book off by heart, pretty much. If you give me a number, I could tell you what color range it's in. So,
Wow.
but that's the other thing. It's like I know what colors go together. I just can't name them. So I know that a green goes with a yellow or whatever it needs to be. But
That's crazy. Well, I think that's a great testament to kind of live your dreams, even if logic would tell you not to. Logically, you shouldn't be
Yeah.
designing things as you are, but you found a workaround and you're doing amazing work. So I love that.
Embrace it. Yeah, embrace your differences.
Well, look, the last thing I always like to ask, and it's always a bit of a big question, but can you pin down like a real lesson you've learned from your creative journey, or something that you'd share to someone who's maybe just starting to break out into this field, or thinking, yeah, I'd like to do what he does?
Um, Travel if you can, if you can experience other cultures and just I mean we've used this word, if you can be quite mindless about how you approach things, don't go in with an idea that you think it has to be. My creativity has always come from an area that if I'm really struggling, it is that step away. Just step away and just go and be silent somewhere. Or pick up a sketchbook, or go and make a meal, or go and listen to music, or go and watch a play, or find culture that you love and just explore it, pull that apart, and literally take things apart and look at how that goes together. These films that I'm doing with We Get It at the moment, I've just learned about, normally with any sort of charity film, they're generally quite plinky plonky. It's like plinky plonky piano, just sound bedded under the bottom. And with this one in particular, I just knew we didn't want that sort of genre. We have to change it up. So I've been watching stuff like First Dates and Married at First Sight, and these sort of more sort of drama documentary kind of, I don't know what they call real life kind of scenarios. And even adverts now, I didn't ever really tune in to sort of audio before, but now I'm identifying that there's so many different sound beds that are used to take your emotion up, that corresponds to what they're saying, to pull you back down again, and then it's playful and you dance along with it. And it's kind of being more observant. And certainly if you're not naturally a listener, so there's visual thinkers and narrative thinkers, those that perceive the world with their eyes first and then listen later. I'm one of those people. If you told me how to get to your house, like told me the story, I wouldn't get there. If you drew me a map, I'd be there in a second. I can visualize it. So it is just breaking down or identifying how you know, how you sort of navigate life, and using different. Why have I got thumbs up?
I don't know.
What have you? How do you navigate life, and then using those other means as well, listening more, or if you're a natural listener, then like I would imagine with you take in the world through your ears and then verbalize it. I'm the other way. I'm kind of take it all through my eyes, and then it comes out through my hands and sort of creativity.
Yeah, I mean, I can take a written word and think about different ways to bring that to life. I think I'm quite visual in that way. I love the fact that what you're telling me there is basically that you're trying to pretend that you're watching Married at First Sight for creative research purposes.
Yeah. No, I love the psychology of it. I love it. I do love the kind of, the whys and hows and wheres, and also how orchestrated it is. I mean, you can pull the curtain back on that quite easily and just work out how the production team have told them to go and do something. But that's what I love. I mean, I can, I'm not one of these people that believes things like X Factor is not a talent show. It is just a dramatization of ridiculous personality
As
be
a
entertained by it.
as a wrestling fan for 30 years, it's all about suspension of disbelief. Just enjoy what's on the
Yeah.
screen and allow
The
yourself to
wrestling
be
world,
entertained.
I've never understood, because it isn't. It is just theatre and dance, isn't it? It's just
Physical theatre is, I think, the number
yeah,
one way to describe it. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No, I get
Um,
it.
so last thing is for my audience who have been inspired by your story today, where can they find out more? So you said about social media and your love-hate relationship of it, but what socials are you on and what's your website? Plug away, my friend.
My website is rednine.co.uk. On Instagram, I think I'm also just at Rednine Design. And LinkedIn, I'm Robin Worrall.
There you go. Well, look, find Robin, connect with him. More importantly, have a look at the work. I'm going to put some stuff in the show notes with this episode. Have a look at some of the great charities Robin's worked with and some of the awesome work he's done as well. that brings us to a close today, Robin. I have to always give a thanks at this point, firstly, to everyone that's taken the time to listen or watch today's purpose-driven conversation. A special thanks to my producer, Jeff Easton from Tall Lake Productions, who will do a lovely job in adding all of your creative flourishes to this episode. But most importantly, thank you, Robin, for your time today, for your honesty, but most importantly, for your friendship. And let's get back to doing our walks again very, very soon.
It's been an absolute delight. I have to say, I was nervous of doing this, but you've relaxed me into it immediately. It's been an absolute treat. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not these things aren't interviews; they're conversations. It's very, very easy to have a conversation with a good friend. So that is us done. I've been Ben Veal from Second Mountain. My special guest has been Robin Worrall from Rednine. This has been Good Journeys with Second Mountain. So until next time, let's keep climbing together, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.